Welcome back to the Painting Coach, and in this tutorial we'll be painting the God King Sigmar's personal huntress, Yndrasta, the Celestial Spear. Okay, let's talk about Yndrasta, and let's talk about how we have sub-assembled to make life a little easier. So we've got Yndrasta herself. I've got her cloak and the kind of bit of wood separate, which I've primed with Corax White. I've got the wings separate, which I've primed with Corax White as well. As for Yndrasta herself, I've primed it with black, so Chaos Black, and then I've sprayed Retributor Armour over her. To get that gold armour. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint the gold armour. We need to brighten this up a little bit. So the colour I'm going to use is Liberator Gold, and I'm going to paint this over all the lighter areas of gold. Now you can see it covers okay, but it may need a couple of thin coats. So let that dry, and then we'll come back to it and we'll give it a bit of a shade. Keep an eye out for the parts on Yndrasta which are kind of like a darker gold. So this emblem here, for example, is a darker gold. So I'm going to leave that in the kind of the Retributor Armour, but otherwise I'm going to work my way around getting this Liberator Gold all over. So get that done, nice solid coat, and then when we come back we'll have a look at shading it. Once you've got that done, we're going to shade it all down, and we'll start to kind of differentiate between the different metallic parts with this. So the colour I'm using is Reikland Fleshshade. Now, what is really important to do is to really spread this out so you don't let it pool. You're just looking for it to go into those absolute deepest recesses because the armour is quite bright. So work your way around, and what we'll do is we'll come back in and highlight it all. But with this Reikland Fleshshade, you can do all of the gold. So all the bits that, like the darker gold on this comet icon here, for example, you can do. Work it into those recesses. And like I say, don't let it pool because we don't want it to pool. We just want it to kind of glaze the armour really. So get that done, let it dry, and then we're going to come back and we'll highlight it up. Once that Reikland Fleshshade is dry, we're going back to Liberator Armour and we're going to brighten up the armour. Sorry, Liberator Gold to brighten up the armour. And what we're looking to do is work this all over, just leaving the Reikland in the recesses because the gold is kind of a very bright silver gold. So down in there, particularly here. So you can also use it where you've got the darker gold. So for example on the weapons, on the swords, on the hilt and everything, you can use it there just to highlight that darker Retributor armour as well. So take your time, work your way around, get it done, catch as many lines as you can to get those hard edges. And then we'll come back and we'll do the next highlight. The last highlight we'll do on the gold for now, and the reason I say for now is we may do one later, just to make it really pop, is Canoptek Alloy. So just getting a little bit on my brush, and what we're looking to do with this is we're looking to highlight all those kind of areas following the kind of the line, the breastplate there. Catching any raised areas by pulling the brush alongside them, just to give that really bright gold effect. So it's nice and simple, nice and straightforward. Work around all the armour. Don't forget the back armour that's attached to the cloak, and then we'll start the silver metallics next. So we'll base the silver with some Iron Warriors. Now, there's quite a bit on Yndrasta, so we've got the mail here underneath. Just be careful going over any bits you may have already finished. We've also got these bits here, so with these kind of the comet tails, the rune in the middle on there. There's lots of little bits of silver on there, so if you're not sure which bit's which, obviously you've got the blades of the weapons. If you're not sure which bit's which, just check the box art. I wouldn't check the website. It's a little bit blown out on there in terms of the colours, but the box art's okay. And the kind of some of the more pictures that are on things like Warhammer Community. So get all that silver done, and then we'll come back and we'll shade it down next. Starting to get that separation of the colours out now, so we can start to see things a little bit more effectively. So what we want to do is shade that silver down, and the colour I'm going to use for this is Nuln Oil. I'm just going to work this over the silver, and what I'm looking to do is, again, very similar to what I did with that Reikland Fleshshade. I don't want it to massively pool anywhere. I just want it to just kind of shade and colour the silver going into those recesses. So get that done over all the silver you've done, and then we'll come back and we'll highlight it up a bit next. Once that Nuln Oil is dry, we need to highlight the silver. So the colour we're going to use as ever is Chrome from Vallejo Model Air. If you haven't got this, I know a few people have been commenting on my videos saying that it's not readily available. You can use Stormhold Silver. And generally what we're looking to do is just catch those raised edges. So just pulling the brush along them. Now this is the new Games Workshop brush, which I'm kind of trying out. And what I've noticed is the paint does come off it a bit thick. Whereas with the Red Grass Games brush I normally use, it comes off a lot thinner. So excuse me, I just need to be a little bit more careful with it. So working around all the silver, catching those edges where you can. You get a nice highlight, and I'll show you kind of on the spear a bit here as well. Just drop it down so it's in focus. Just pull along that sharp edge. You can get a decent highlight. So get all the silver done. If you want as well, so the sharpest edges of some of the gold, you can add a little bit of a highlight on there as well, just to really brighten it up. And then we'll come back, and I think we'll have a look at the red of the cloak next. So Yndrasta's got a nice cape, and the back side of it is red, and the inside is white. So we'll do the red first, which means we can correct any mistakes later on. So just using some Khorne Red, just paint this all over the cloak. Now, because I've gone for a white prime, it's going to take a couple of coats, and it's not going to be particularly dark in the recesses. So the other thing we want to do as well that we've got on the cloak, we've got a little bit of a design inside just there. So again, we want to take some of that Khorne Red, and we want to just paint it in. So it's really important that the paint is thin enough so it flows off your brush, and you can just work it in. So that's not perfect. I'm going to have to go and correct some of that, but that's fine because Corax White will cover over that, no problem. So get this done. Make sure you do both sides. Obviously, finish the rest of the cloak, and then we'll come back and shade it next. So we're going to shade the cloak now. What I've done, I've got a little bit of Abaddon Black on the palette, and I'm going to mix that in with the Khorne Red just to get a darker tone. Something a bit like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this into the shadows. That should give us a nice blend in there. Just generally a nicer effect than if we're going to chuck Nuln Oil in there. So just kind of painting it down like that. Now, you can see I've got that edge there. If I go back to the pure Khorne Red, I can just gently blend that together like that. And you just work back and forward doing that kind of blending to get the kind of shape and colour you want. And if you need to add a bit more black in for those lower areas, you can do. Nice and easy, nice and simple. So I'm going to finish that. The other thing I did as well, which I forgot to say, was I've painted the strapping of the weapons with the Khorne Red as well. So we'll come back and shade those next. Shading the hafts of the weapons, it's really straightforward. Just take some Nuln Oil, just work it into there, into those recesses, and like I said, you don't want to flood the model, you just want to get those darkest bits in there, and we'll highlight them all next. We'll probably highlight the cloak first, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to highlight the hafts. You can see I've got some still wet bits here, and what I've done, I've kind of mixed up some Evil Sunz Scarlet. I've mixed it into the Khorne Red there. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight kind of most of the cloak now, particularly those areas where we've established that it's going to be brighter. So get that done, and then, or actually before we kind of disappear from here, let's just take some pure Evil Sunz Scarlet. So my brush is just a little wet. Just work that through the kind of the most raised areas towards the edge. And as it dries, that'll blend in. So we've got a little bit of a sharper highlight left to do on the cloak, then we'll highlight the weapons. The last highlight on the cloak is going to be a real sharp one. I've really thinned down some Kislev Flesh, so just make sure you've got hardly any on your brush. You're just looking for a real thin, sharp highlight, just like that. And then in the corner, just catching the shape of the model. Apologies if you can hear cars outside the house. It sounds like there's a racetrack out there today. So that's the cloak done. We'll have a little look at doing the weapon hafts next. So to highlight the weapon hafts, we're going to use a little bit of pink horror. And what we're looking to do, let's see if I can catch here. You've obviously got the pattern of the wrap going around, and we just want to highlight the kind of the diagonal shapes. Now you can lightly dry brush this if you want. You know, if you want to speed things up, you can just leave it totally blank. But I think this just adds a little bit more interest around what can be a fairly boring part of the model. So get that done, and then we'll come back, and I think we'll move on to all the white parts next. So there are quite a few bits that need to be painted white on the model. So I've got some Corax White on the palette. So what I'm going to do is I'm kind of work my way around and just point out what needs doing. So we've got the comet tails here. Now when you put this Corax White down over the metallic, it may not stick very well. So just let it dry, because it'll leave a residue, and then when you put a second coat on, it'll dry fine. So the other things we want to do, so we've got a lot of gems. So we've got a gem in here, which we want to do with the white to help my brush actually touch the model. Just the angles are not fantastic. And then in all the weapons, we've got these gems as well. So we want to paint those white. And the other thing we need to do as well, of course, is with the cloak on the inside, just go in and tidy up any of the kind of the red that you may have spilt, or any of that insert that needs correcting. And of course we've got the inside of the runes on the weapon and just in there as well. We've also got Yndrasta's hair, so I'm going to paint her hair and her face with a couple of thin layers of Corax White. And then when we come back, we'll focus on the cloak, and then we'll do all the different bits around the model as well. So the first thing we'll do on the cloak is shade it, and I'm using Apothecary White contrast paint for this, but I'm making sure that I don't have very much on my brush at all. And what I'm doing is I'm just poking that into the recesses where I've got folds in the cloak, and where that kind of runs up into Yndrasta's body. So it's very subtle in terms of the effect. And that's what I'll do, is I'll let that dry, and then I may need to go in with some more. If I do, I will. The other thing I want to do as well, is if I just move that out and bring Yndrasta back in is for all the white bits. So, you know, we've got these comet tails here, for example. I'm going to paint those with the Apothecary White. And I'm also going to do her hair as well with the Apothecary White. So it doesn't matter if you get that on her face, because we'll paint that separately. But you get that done, and let it dry, and we'll come back and highlight it up next. So let's look at some of the white highlights then. So you use a little bit of white scar. In terms of the cloak, I'm just going to run it down those kind of sharp edges there, into the corner a little bit. It's not a huge amount to do. On the cloak, and just use the shape of the plastic to get that highlight on there. And then when it comes to Yndrasta herself, hopefully I'm in focus there. Again, we want to highlight the central part of these comet tails, and then obviously we can pull it down, catching the edges where relevant. Same for the hair, just catching again. Don't worry too much about hitting the face, because we'll paint that towards the end. So get that done with the white. One thing I did, which I didn't mention on camera, was all these little bits here I painted then, because I'm just going to use contrast to fill those in. So get the white finished, and we'll come up and I think we'll make a start on those runes next. So the first runes we'll do are the blue ones, which are the ones in the weapon. So what I'm going to do is take some Aethermatic Blue contrast paint, and I'm just going to paint this into those runes, just like that. Nice and easy, nice and simple. I'm going to let that dry. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I've got hardly any on my brush, and I'm just going to, on the one side of the blade, just paint up, and on this side of the blade, just paint down. And what that does, it starts to give a very gentle hint of the kind of glow of the blade, I guess. So you don't want it too much, you want it to be very subtle. So do that around all those runes that you've got on the weapons, and then we'll come back and we'll do the red ones next. For the red ones, so we've got the one on the chest here, or shoulder, as well as the runes and the weapons. We're going to use Bloos Angels Red contrast paint. You can see that works lovely and quite well with the white underneath. So get that done and we'll come back and highlight it. So to add a little bit of a highlight, just go back to some of that Kislev Flesh, and again make sure we haven't got too much on our brush. For the star type or the diamond type, just want to touch into the middle there. And then for the orb one, we just want to give it a little, just a little dot at the top. Next up, Yndrasta's got this little bit of scroll work here, so I'm just going to base this with Ushabti Bone. Thinned it down a little bit too much on my brush there, because we don't want to we want to make sure that we've got those recesses so we can shade them easily enough. So this is potentially going to take 2 coats, in fact it's definitely going to take 2 coats. So just work your own, get it done, be careful around bits you've already finished, and then we'll come back and shade it down next. To get that text shaded, we'll use some Reikland Fleshshade. Now, what I would say is try to just get the text covered, but it's going to be difficult for me to do that on cam, so I'm just going to have to go back in and tidy up. So get it into the recesses, then go in and tidy it up. So let it dry, tidy it up with some Ushabti Bone, and then when we come back we'll highlight it. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm just going to paint all the kind of rock work with some Eshin Grey, just to kind of help move things along in terms of how long it's going to take me. Now you don't have to do this now, you can do it later. I'm just doing it now because obviously I'm making the video and I need to make sure that I've got enough time to edit it all. So I'm going to get the Eshin Grey all over the rocks, all the rubble, and then when it's dry we'll come back and we'll highlight up the bit of parchment before we do the face. To highlight that little bit of parchment, I'm going to take some Pallid Witch Flesh, which is quite a bit brighter than the Ushabti Bone underneath, but that's okay because it'll help it stand out against the kind of the gold armour there. So nice and simple, follow the shape of the model where you can. Don't forget the back side. And then we'll come back and we'll make a start on the face next. So to base the face, you can use some thinned down pale flesh, which is Vallejo game colour. So being careful around the hair, making sure that we're not actually catching any of it. We're just going to cover the whole face. Now I've thinned this down quite a bit, so I might need to put a second coat on there. So get that done and we'll come back and shade it next. We'll shade the face with a little bit of Reikland Fleshshade. Now make sure you haven't got too much on your brush, and what we're looking to do is just shade around kind of the eyes, the mouth, the nose, inside of the ear, and then where the kind of hair meets, just kind of in there. So nice and straightforward. Let that dry and we'll just highlight it up next. Once that Reikland Fleshshade is dry, I'm going to go back to that pale flesh. And what I'm going to look to do is make sure that I can just reinstate those kind of the raised areas, sort of around the nose, the cheekbone, the ear. Just gently working it in. Okay, and the lip. So that brings the brightness back to the face. So I might just finish off the ear there, make sure I've got it, being careful not to get it elsewhere. So let that dry. I think I'm pretty happy with how light it is, but I may add a little highlight in, so I'll have a little think and I'll do that next. So I've just added a little bit of white scarring, about 50-50 into that pale flesh. I don't want too much on my brush, but I'm just kind of aiming again for those most prominent areas, such as the nose, the brow, and the cheek. So I'm happy with that. So I clean off my brush. Let's see if I can take some of that white scar from earlier, or some of that Corax White actually. Again, make sure there's not too much on the brush. And I'm going to use this just to dot in the eyes. I'm not too concerned that that's kind of filled the whole gap, because we're going to give her some nice glowing blue eyes. So let that dry and we'll do the glow next. So for the glow, just going to use a tiny bit of Aethermatic Blue. Just drop it into those eye sockets like that. Nice and simple. And if you want to kind of make it a bit more pronounced, you can try and white dot it as well. So the next thing we'll do, I'll just show you how to do the stubble where the shaved head is. So if you have a look on the palette, you can see I've got a little bit of that Eshin Grey that I used to base everything up earlier. I'm just going to mix in with what's left of that pale flesh, and that's the kind of tone I'm looking for. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heavily thin that down. So that then is basically the colour we're going to use for the stubble. And in terms of how you apply this to the model, make sure you've got hardly any on your brush at all, and then just paint it over where that hair would have been. Now in that first pass you can see that actually it's not covered too much at all. So what you do is let that dry and then go in and do another coat of it. So it's fairly thin, so it's going to dry fairly quick. So I'm just going to go back in with another kind of glaze of that stubble. And you can see there, now we've actually got the effect we're looking for. We've got that nice shaved side of the head. So that should be dry. We'll do the leather next. So we'll go for a nice reddy brown leather. And the base we'll use for that is Rhinox Hide, which I've had on the palette for a while, but I keep forgetting to do the leather. So we've got the strap on the kind of the van brace there. Let's get that done. And we've also got the belt as well, so obviously be careful on the belt when it comes to those bits we've finished. And if you paint over into there, you can always go back over it with some silver. Get that done, and then we'll come back and highlight. So in terms of highlighting, we'll just use a nice little bit of Mournfang Brown there, and we're just looking to catch the kind of the two edges of the leather strap and of the belt. So obviously some metal studs on the belt that we can go in and finish as well. And when it comes to the leather, obviously don't forget you've got the bits around the greaves and straps, etc. all over. So we are, get that done. That's looking pretty good now. I'm happy with Yndrasta. Have we got any more to do on her? No, just those kind of metal studs. So we'll have a look at the tree trunk that kind of comes around the back next. For the tree going up behind Yndrasta, I'm going to cover the whole thing in Wyldwood contrast paint. So use it, make sure it's smooth brush strokes, because you don't want that to kind of flick up into some of those bits you've already finished. Be careful in those areas where you've already finished, like on the cloak there. And make sure you get all the bits, because sometimes you'll miss a little bit and then it just looks a little odd. So really work that contrast paint in there. There's a little animal there which will you can paint whatever colour you want. I'm not going to show you how to paint all the kind of bits of vegetation, just the main ones. So get that done, let it dry thoroughly, and then we'll come back and we'll give it a little dry brush, and then we'll just shade it to kind of blend in with the rest of the base. When that Wyldwood's dry, I'm going to give it a heavy dry brush with some Corax stone. Again, being careful not to get it anywhere that we shouldn't. So just give that branch stump a good going over, and then once that's done, I'll stick it to the rest of Yndrasta, and we're nearly done. We've got the wings to do, obviously, and parts of the base, but we'll get this all stuck on, and then we'll see where we are. So Yndrasta is now stuck together. So what I've done, I've used some Astro Granite on the base. That little pool of water, all that is just some green paint with some gloss varnish over it. So what I want to do is I want to start to tie this whole thing together. And the way I'm going to do that is take some Athonian Camoshade, and I'm going to paint this over all of the kind of the rubble on the base, or the steps, just like that. Just because that's the kind of the green from the swamp just finding its way onto everything. I'm also going to paint the tree as well, give it a nice little green hue. So get that all done as well, let it dry, and then we'll come back and we'll see how we go, whether we do this or we do the wings next. In terms of edging it, I've edged it with Eshin Grey for now, but I'll see if I keep it that colour, we'll see. So get that done, and then we'll come back. So we are very nearly done. So let's have a look at the wings then, while we wait for the stuff to dry. So this is, obviously I primed them with Corax White, and I'm just going to paint them with, it's a 3-to-1 mix of Gryph Charger Grey and Contrast Medium. And this is to tint the wings. Now, let me take it off there because it's not stuck on particularly well. So hopefully that's still in focus there. And just paint this all over. You don't want it pooling anywhere. This is literally just move it around, because all you're doing is just changing the colour from white to this kind of really thin grey, greeny blue colour. So get that done, and then we'll come back and we'll add some of the more definition in. Once that first layer is dry, we're going to use the same mix, so 3:1 contrast medium to Gryph Charge Grey. And what we're going to do is going to focus on these kind of bunches of feathers here that go all the way round towards where the feathers go into the back. So we'll just create that definition there. And if you think you've put too much on, it's easy enough to fix just with a little bit of a clean brush. And the other thing we want to do is we want to get these tips a bit darker. So just paint in from about kind of halfway on that feather down to the bottom. And we're going to do this all the way around these bottom feathers here. And then we're going to let that dry. And if we kind of feel that, you know what, we need to add a little bit more to make it darker, then we can do. You can see this bit here is just to kind of run into there a little bit. So work your way around, get that done. I think those tips are dark enough. So let it dry, we'll come back and highlight it. We've got one highlight to do, and then Yndrasta is pretty much complete. I'll just show you how I finish the base off. The last highlight then that we need to do on the wings is pretty straightforward. So take some white scar, or whatever your white of choice is. There's a couple of things we're going to do. We're going to run it along the edges of the feathers. So just from maybe halfway down. And I'm doing this, like I said, because I'm running it along the edge of the feather. It's fairly easy to get a nice sharp highlight. And if we turn that the other way, just mindful to make sure that I stay in focus, we're going to do the bottom side as well. So that isolates everything. And then the last thing we want to do is we just want to look for these little nicks and notches, and we want to paint just a line in behind them like that, nice and straightforward. So do that over the wings, outline all the kind of individual feathers, but you know, if you want to go wild you can, and you can add a lot more detail in, but I think this is sufficient and I think it looks pretty good. So like I say, work your way around, get it all done, and then we'll just finish off the base on Yndrasta and have a look around the turntable. So the first thing we're going to do on the base is I'm just going to roughly dry brush the edges here with some Dawnstone. And I'm probably going to go back to the paint a few times to get more on. I'm just going to build up a kind of a rough lighter layer doing it like this. So get that done and we'll come back and with a final highlight. Next up, I'm using the same brush without cleaning it. I've just got some Administratum Grey, and I'm kind of doing the same thing where I'm just aggressively stabbing and catching kind of rough edges, and you can see it's starting to give the impression of stonework there. So work your way around and just, you know, start off with a little bit. You can always add more, but I'm going to kind of go in and just brighten up these rocks a bit. And then lastly, again, same brush, not washed, just a little bit of white scar just across those kind of top bits to give the impression of, you know, this is where the rock has worn, chipped and worn away. Like that. Nice and simple. Not sure what's going outside with outside with all the kids playing. But hopefully you've managed to follow along and are happy with your results. So what I'll do is I'm going to glue the wings on and we'll have a look at Yndrasta on the turntable next. There we have it. Yndrasta is done, ready to take to the battlefield and hunt down the foes of Sigmar. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please leave a like and a comment down below. It really does help me make sure I'm creating the kind of content that you'd like to see. If you would like to support the channel, you can do so using the links in the description. There's the link for my Patreon where you get exclusive access to me on the Discord, a monthly live frequently asked questions show, as well as some exclusive content and some giveaways. There's the links for Goblin Gaming where you get up to 20% of all your wargaming needs, as well as my Amazon affiliate links where you can see some of my recommended equipment. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.